Good morning. Thank you for joining our session. My name is Eric Calvert. I'm one of the Associate Directors at the Center for Talent Development. With me this morning is Amy Lindgren. And today we'd like to talk with you about our online programs and some lessons learned over more than 30 years of working with gifted and talented students online. As we go through, feel free to type questions in the Q&A or the chat box. And we'll have plenty of time to go over those at the end of the session. We'll multitask a little bit too, so if we can answer some of your questions in the chat as we go, we'll be happy to do that. And then also we'll have all of our contact information, or if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, we'd be happy to communicate with you after the session. Also, I wanted to note, if you'd like a copy of today's slides to share or view later, there's a link in the chat that you can save and be able to go back to this anytime you like if you want to explore some of the links that you'll see on screen as we go. So for those of you that aren't familiar with our center, we are part of the School of Education and Social Policy at Northwestern University. We are a comprehensive center engaged in both research as well as direct services to students and families. We think that that's a really important feature of our center because our programming is informed by our research, and our research informs our programming. So it's a really great opportunity for us to continuously evolve. I'm seeing some notes in the chat box that the screen's a little bit blurry. If that's the case for you, we apologize about that. A good solution might be for you to go ahead and copy that link to the downloadable presentation. So if you want to be able to go back and see that later, that text will be totally clear. And hopefully things will resolve, and we'll do what we can to make things as viewable and comfortable for everybody as we go. So just to give you a little bit of history in our journey in online learning, we've been in distance learning actually longer than the World Wide Web has been in existence. So our first distance learning programs were started in 1982, and that was a single Latin course that happened via mail correspondence. Literally, assignments and materials would be physically mailed to students' homes. They would complete work and mail it back. And then, of course, when the internet started, we saw lots of opportunity, and those mail-based correspondence programs became email-based correspondence programs, which cut out a lot of lag time, but still made it a very kind of one-to-one experience just between instructors and individual students. But then when the World Wide Web came into existence fairly shortly thereafter, CTD got on board with fully online learning. And at first, like a lot of schools, our approach was to look at the traditional classroom and then try to recreate that with the highest fidelity possible in the online space. So I kind of refer to that as our skeuomorphic phase, where we were simply trying to replicate as best we could how things worked in a traditional classroom in the online space. And if you think about some of the metaphors of some of the systems that were used in that era, you know, Blackboard was the most popular learning management system at the time. And if you think about like that brand name itself, you know, it's literally trying to take, you know, a very traditional technology from the brick and mortar classroom and put that in the online space. But of course, the experience there was usually that, you know, if something was really designed and then optimized over decades or even hundreds of years, if we're, you know, thinking about, you know, things like chalkboards, that it often felt like the online version was sort of a less than slightly lower fidelity, experience that was kind of, you know, a substitute for the real thing, like the Diet Coke, to the full sugar experience. But as more and more of our lives moved online, and the web itself started to develop its own culture, we started to understand more and more about how people use the web, how people want to interact with one another in an online space, we began exploring not just how do we replicate the brick and mortar experience in an online environment, but actually started stepping back and thinking about if school never existed before and we started trying to design learning experiences for students post-web, what would those look like? How would those be different? How would the structure of the school day, the structure of a course, how people interact be different if we thought natively about the core features of the web and how people naturally interact in that space. And that's really been the journey that we've been on for the last several years. And then, of course, with the emergence of the COVID pandemic, interest in online learning has really exploded. But I know a lot of people now are really struggling to make that transition. So we want to, in part, just give you reassurance that that you'll make it, that this can be a really exciting space to work in, and that over time, if you continue to work with students in an online environment and keep an open mind to evolving towards a digitally native space, you will find things that are unique and different that I think that you'll want to keep even when schools fully reopen and we're able to work with kids face-to-face in brick and mortar environments again. So now we're at a stage where we have over 7,000 students going from that one Latin class, serving mostly kids in the Midwest, all the way to a program now where we're working with students, not just in our immediate area around Chicago, but nationally and even internationally. And now we're starting to explore the implications of that for opportunities for collaboration when we have issues like time zones to navigate. So it constantly reveals challenges, but also constantly stimulates creativity among our team. So next, we want to just kind of show you, and we'll go into more detail about our programs, but we put together a little video that gives you just a little bit of flavor of what our programs look and feel like. So I'd like to play that for you now.
Center for Talent Development has been providing innovative, research-driven talent development programming for advanced learners pre-K through grade 12 since 1982. People may know our in-person and on-campus programming best, but we invite you to get to know us in the online learning environment. Why? Because it's awesome. We've been embracing and perfecting distance learning for over 30 years.
Virtual classrooms can be an amazing opportunity for student-centered learning. They can be very rigorous, but they can also be a lot of fun.
One of the things that we try to implement in all of our CTD programming is to work with the whole child. And we do that with our gifted learning links, our online programming as well. Talent development requires more than just gaining knowledge. It also requires motivation, persistence, and risk-taking. So teachers work to develop those skills through the challenging content that they provide in their courses. They're there to encourage students to take risks, to persist with difficult problems, and to support them when they feel dejected about their performance. In this way, they focus on improvement and growth.
In the early grades, our design focus is on opportunities for exploration in the talent development framework that guides our program design. At this stage, we focus on what we call teaching for falling in love. That's getting students excited about the possibilities within a domain. So the focus is on giving students hands-on experiences that apply science, technology, mathematics in ways that are exciting. In the older elementary middle grades, our programs emphasize opportunities for advanced learners to be able to accelerate academically. Online, we can bring together students from communities of all shapes and sizes and from all around the world.
Give your child a chance to grow, thrive, and learn, not only from excellent instructors, but from a diverse array of students around the world.
My class was big and had a lot of diversity within its students. Because of this, our discussions were very lively and it had a large range of perspectives.
My name is Ed.D. I'm 7 years old and I've been taking Ctd classes since I was 3.
The Ctd online program has helped me become more creative and more social. We can participate in book club, art club, social lunch, and so much more.
I love seeing them learn new things, and I love when they show how they have mastered the concepts in a class, and that's always very exciting to me.
I think something that makes our service learning and leadership courses at Ctd a unique learning experience is our commitment to building community with and amongst students, and our commitment to fostering leadership and skill building around critical thinking skills, communication skills, and commitment to taking action on issues that students really care about. So in our online classrooms, we are working very intentionally to help students get to know one another. We're providing a lot of tools for our instructors and our TAs to get to know students, understanding their interests, where their passions lie, what strengths they bring, and where they want to grow during the course. In our live class sessions online, we're doing a lot of small group work, a lot of working in pairs, and students have told us they really enjoy that part of the course.
The Civic Leadership Institute has been extremely helpful. I learned how to address and recognize injustice all over the world. I was able to strengthen my pitching skills and learned how to organize my own projects.
One of the things I love most about teaching online is the flexibility. The flexibility that I'm offered as a professional, and the flexibility that my students have when taking the course. They can proceed at the course as fast as they want, or through the pacing guidelines that I offer in the class.
Ctd Online is a vibrant community. In many ways, it forges connections and provides opportunities that might not be possible if programs were only campus-based. Students from around the world engage in discussions about topics that they're passionate about, and they develop critical knowledge, skills, and perspectives that they may not get anywhere else. Explore the variety of online options we offer to students pre-K through grade 12. From family courses with hands-on activities, to live synchronous sessions, to asynchronous, flexibly paced courses, there's something for everyone.
See you online.
See you online.
See you online.
Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what our programs kind of look and feel like. And now Amy and I would like to kind of walk you through kind of behind the scenes a little bit and share a little bit about our philosophy and kind of how our thinking about how the design of online programs should evolve. So as you might expect, we're the Center for Talent Development. So we are inspired by the talent development framework that's probably best articulated by our center director, Paula Shesky-Kabilius, and her colleagues, Rena Sabatnik and Frank Worrell. There's a great book that you can explore. I think Proofrock is probably is exhibiting this as well, but it talks about the talent development framework in the context of program design. And we really kind of follow this almost as our manual for thinking about how to develop programs and how to stretch our thinking about what's possible in an online space. So if you're not familiar with the talent development framework, just a few key points to know about it is that the first assumption is that ability is malleable. So versus the traditional view where we thought that IQ, for example, was static and something that you were born with and never changed, like eye color or hair color, we've learned that abilities develop differently in different students. That ability often emerges at different times and develops at different rates. And so we have to be thoughtful about being open to recognizing talent wherever it might emerge and whenever it might emerge. And so Amy will talk a little bit about how we think about that concept in the context of our programs for younger students here in just a moment. The second key concept of the talent development framework is this idea that the concept of giftedness should be seen as developmental. And what we mean by that is that when we think about a gifted child versus a gifted adult, that concept of giftedness shifts over time. So for example, when you go out and search popular media like newspapers, magazines, things like that, you'll find lots of references to gifted children. but you very rarely find references to gifted adults generically. But you do find lots of references to gifted politicians, gifted attorneys, gifted doctors, gifted poets, gifted athletes. But the idea is that at some point, we shift from looking just at broad-based potential to looking at giftedness in a context, or giftedness in a domain. So part of what we're trying to do with our programming is to help students discover those things that are going to be high interest areas for them, figure out what they're passionate about, figure out where their strengths are, and to be able to sample a lot of different experiences when they're young, and then have opportunities to accelerate and learn at the pace that works for them as their interests become clear and their goals become clearer to them. Third, is the idea that lots of both internal and external factors influence how and whether potential evolves into actualized talent. And of course, in a school-based context or an educational context, we often think about content knowledge, and providing students with opportunities to develop advanced content knowledge is a really important goal and a really important service that we try to provide through our programs. But we also recognize that, particularly when we're thinking about diverse learners or students that might be either from recent immigrant families or might be first generation college students especially, that a whole constellation of other factors influences the extent to which we have opportunities to develop our gifts and our talents. So some of those are what we frame as psychosocial skills. And those are skills related to being able to use your mind and to use your talents optimally. So understanding your strengths, understanding your interests, and then also developing things like time management skills, study skills, critical thinking skills. And we're thoughtful about how we design opportunities to cultivate those skills into content-based courses. A third concept that we think is really important at our center is that students need access to opportunity at critical gateways. For many of us, if we kind of think about our own career paths and our own educational paths, often there are these little critical experiences or these individuals that come into our lives that have a big impact. They're the people that say, hey, you seem to have a knack for X. Have you ever tried Y? Hey, you seem to be really interested in this topic. Have I got an opportunity for you? Those people that kind of step in and become our mentors, our peers, our supporters, and even our friendly competitors, all support our talent development. And so it's important for us to think about the context of curriculum and how we can connect people to people as well as people to content. And then the last concept that we think is really important is culture and community values. And so what is valued in our communities influences how our potential develops. So for example, if you take two newborn babies, one born in, say, Jamaica and the other born in Canada, that both have, amazing natural athletic ability, the child born in Jamaica is more likely to develop into an elite sprinter, whereas that baby in Canada is more likely to have opportunities to develop into an elite hockey player. And that's because the values of those communities are different, and then those values help create opportunities for talent development. But we also recognize that often, particularly in the internet age, where we can often discover things that are really niche-y online that maybe other people in our local community don't care about. But there might be a very vibrant online community that's really passionate about that. So if we can find ways to connect students with other students and with adult mentors and instructors that are passionate about those things, that value the abilities that students bring to the table, the more likely students are to be able to persist in developing those natural abilities, because they will have found a support group for doing that. So one of the things that we've been working at the last few years is even going beyond what we're doing in the context of courses to even having a wraparound, largely student-led online community, so students can share their interests through our online program called Backpack. We bring in a lot of guest speakers on special topics, but much of what students are doing is sharing their own work with other students and engaging in collaborative activities. We, over the summer, had a big group of students that were spontaneously working on Harry Potter fan fiction together. And they've created blogs, where they share their interests and they follow each other in this little kind of walled garden space. And it's, really kind of a lovely thing. So that extends our community even beyond the context of an individual course that has a beginning, middle, and end. So to give you just a little bit more of a breakdown on how the talent development model then translates into curriculum design. As we noted in the video, with our youngest students, we often talk about teaching for falling in love, that concept of making students excited about the possibilities within domains. I'm sorry, Amy, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about how we think about that in our youngest student programs?
Yes, would you mind, it seems to be the slide is stuck, if you wouldn't mind popping to the next one that has our developmental perspective on giftedness. Still seeing the one with our book title.
Do we have the right slide now?
Not yet, but while we're working on that, if you want to keep trying that, Eric, to advance that, I'm happy to chat a bit about what these stages look like. As Eric mentioned, we do have these key stages, typically called emergent talent, competency, and expertise. So students arrive at CTD in various stages and are encouraged to follow their passions while also developing new ones. And these often generally align with student age. So emergent talent you could think of as being in childhood. Competency would start in later elementary, adolescent years, and expertise would become visible during college and adulthood. But again, students can develop these new passions at any age, and we actively encourage that. And each stage has a number of characteristics, but I just want to touch on a few today to give you a feel for how this looks with different ages. So in emergent talent, students are gaining, again, that foundational exposure through exploration of enrichment topics. They're meeting like-minded peers, and we're helping them begin to love learning. And that's one of the ways that the teacher can be actively involved here, is just exposing students to that joy of learning. When we move into competency, this stage is generally classified by both acceleration and enrichment courses, enhanced collaborations with peers, and we start to see high achievement at this level. Students might also begin to narrow their focus on a particular area or subject, and we start to look more at growth mindset and executive functioning at this stage. And then by expertise, students are really engaging in authentic work within a field. They're taking their focus deeper, networking with like-minded peers and professionals, and moving into apprenticeships or mentoring. And so as we mentioned, you'll see the red rectangles at the bottom of the slide that we can see now that talk about teaching to fit these. So teaching for falling in love would again be instilling that joy of learning, that interest in learning in the emergent stage or with our youngest learners. Teaching for technique, again, as students get more specialized, helping them understand what that looks like. And finally, as we move into expertise, really helping students find that personalized niche and move out into the world on their own. And now Eric's going to chat a little bit about how creativity fits into this perspective in these stages as well.
Sure. And another element of our programming that we think is really important is cultivating those creative things that early creative potential develop into domain-specific ways. And so as students become excited about particular topics or particular domains, and they have those experiences that expose them to the possibilities, then we start introducing authentic vocabulary, authentic practices of the field. We start to try to bring adults into our online space to share their expertise and experience in their personal ways with students so that they have role models and pathways. And then At our highest level of programming, for example, for our high school age students, we have developed a set of really exciting programs that we'll be offering this summer that we call our partnership programs, where we actually team some of the really great instructional designers that are part of our staff with professionals in specific domains that can give students truly authentic learning experiences, truly expose students to the cultures of these adult domains. So for example, we've got some partnership programs coming up this summer with like one, for example, is with an improvisational theater group in Chicago. So students will actually be working with this theater troupe that develops original plays, and those will get performed. We've done really great programs in the past with the Chicago Architecture Foundation on sustainable design. And students have opportunities to work with, the real tools that architects and designers and civil engineers use to create, sustainable resources. That idea that not only are we teaching the vocabulary and the concepts and those kind of canons of knowledge of domains, but we're also not leaving it completely to chance that students will be able to make connections with those people that are going to be the ones that open doors for them, that give them encouragement when they need it, that expose students to the next opportunity that will transition them from a K-12 program to lifelong learning.
And so, we consider both child development stages and our understanding of the talent development framework to build our programming, and really taking this developmental view in how we actually run our online programs. So, for gifted students, I like to say that effective learning occurs when students are ready and interested. For example, when we have open-ended creative thinking activities, where students are comfortable taking risks and making mistakes, as we mentioned earlier, and where they have regular opportunities to share out and present their ideas with peers. And all of these are accessible in both in-person and online learning environments. And that's been one of the things that, as me being someone who's managed both in-person and online learning, has been most exciting, that all these really great creative ways to teach and work with gifted students are absolutely possible, whether we're via Zoom with kids or whether we are live in class with them. And Eric touched on this, but I did want to note as well that the exposure to these different domains and these experiences that students have include not only course content, but also, again, those larger communities of practice that support this student exploration. And so at each stage in the talent development model, we're cultivating a dynamic community within our online spaces, which on this slide is described as the membrane. And so we're thoughtful about increasing both access and interactions at each stage. Slowly but surely, and with supervision, students are gradually building their own online identity and gaining that field experience. And as they advance, the audience is widening with whom they're engaging. They're gaining even more world experience, working with internships, mentors, et cetera, as they move into young adulthood. And because we keep this perspective in mind, with these learning communities being more than just the classroom, one example of how we do that in our programming is with our asynchronous online family program, which offers flexibly paced 4-week modules for age 3 through grade 5 students. We know that our students' very first learning community is their family, which is very safe and contained. And so in how we've set up this program, we're allowing families to engage with course materials on their own schedule while also receiving personalized guidance and feedback from experienced gifted teachers who can help stretch student thinking at home. So these are very guided, playful learning experiences to promote curiosity and anchor that lifelong love of learning, since, again, at this stage, student interests aren't really fully formed, and we're still wanting them to gain that experience, to see what is of interest to them, to see what stays out to them, and to start to build those higher order thinking. In these classes, students are making connections directly to their own experiences as they're acquiring foundational knowledge in science, math, English language arts, and they're actually engaging in offline hands-on activities at home, since that's really developmentally appropriate for them. And then they come back online and build community with their peers through enriching online discussions. They also, in this format, receive rich feedback but no grades, again, allowing for opportunities to take safe risks and make mistakes in a really low stakes but also very supportive learning community. For secondary students, in contrast, this can look very different since they are much further along on their developmental and growth stages. One example is our accelerated summer option. So in this case, students are highly motivated to complete a full course, academic course over a very short summer term. And because they've already developed the cognitive, executive functioning, and psychosocial skills needed to manage their learning independently, they're ready for this. So in this stage, the balance really shifts from direct instructor facilitation, specific scheduling of coursework, to a setting that's almost like an independent study, but still with individual feedback with that instructor. And so again, because they've built those domain experiences and skills over time, learners are ready for this format at this particular point. So those are just a couple of examples of a few of the ways that we've built these in. And again, I think all of the things here, all of these items are things that work great, again, in the online setting and in person as well. So I want to reassure you about that. Are folks able to hear me okay at this point? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to keep going and then hopefully Eric will be back with us in just a moment here. Excuse our technical difficulties. So another key concept to consider is this idea of how we view the online space as what we might call a hub versus the entire universe or the sole space that we're working in. We like to think of it really as a balance. There are times where fully online activities are optimal and potentially the most appropriate best option, but we also acknowledge, particularly related to child development in different phases, that sometimes offline activities are actually more appropriate for all or some of our students, to really engage directly with different manipulatives and learn in a very hands-on way. I'm going to pause for a second. Eric, are you back with us?
I am, but my Zoom tools keep freezing, so I'm having trouble getting the screen reshared. So if you have, oh wait, it's coming back.
Thanks again, everybody, for your patience. I know I'm sure we've all sat in a lot of these Zoom meetings lately where no matter how well we think it'll work, there's just times where technology got to go with the flow and it's not cooperating. There we go. I'm seeing it now.
Okay, great. So thank you for your patience. I hope everybody can see and hear okay now. I don't know if you heard anything that I said about this slide, so I'll kind of start over. But one of the kind of aha moments we had as we started thinking about developing what we were framing as hybrid programs that mix and match elements of face-to-face and online learning, is that, as we've sort of continued kind of our journey of using technology in education, we started to realize that the kind of old debate about which is better, online versus face-to-face, is just the wrong question. That really the future of learning is a mix and match kind of hybrid experience. And that's affected our thinking about programming in two ways. First, for our traditional face-to-face programming that in non-pandemic times we do on campus, or that we bring programming into brick and mortar schools, we're recognizing that there's value of having a technology-based layer to that. So online tools can complement things that we're doing face-to-face to do things like extending discussion outside of class, providing supplemental resources that extend students' knowledge, making it easier to differentiate what you're doing in a face-to-face classroom. So I hope as schools are exploring online learning in sort of emergency mode, that you're also thinking about, even when we go back to school full-time face-to-face, what elements of this online experience should we keep? And how can these tools advantage us in the traditional mode? And then on the flip side, even as we think about our online programming, we recognize that the best way to experience certain kinds of learning activities is not necessarily by interacting with a piece of software through a screen. So for example, research suggests that the reading skills that we draw upon are different when we're reading print texts like books and newspapers versus when we read content online, which is hyperlinked and less linear. So if we want to develop literacy in both ways, we can use books in the context of an online class. So think about using the online space as the hub of learning, but don't think that just because you're working with students online, that necessarily means that students can't do hands-on activities, that students can't read books, that there aren't things that we have students download. For example, many of our science courses, we do kind of field-based research. So, students are guided to go out and observe things in nature or collect data from their environments. But then the fact that students are working together with other students that are in different places makes that a more exciting experience, because you're seeing sort of different perspectives on things that are local. So think of that online space as the hub for learning, but not necessarily the whole widget. If something hands-on or something face-to-face is really going to be a higher quality experience, then think about how we can facilitate that or enhance that with the online space rather than trying to completely replace it. We live our whole lives now, in hybrid mode. Even when we're socializing with our friends or on vacation, we're capturing images and we're sharing our reflections with the people that we're connected with online. So think about how to connect that real world and that online world to give students the richest experience possible.
And one example of how we've done this is in our Weekend at Home program. So these are interactive live courses that are paced to allow for alternating times of observing and creating, talking and listening, individual or partner, and whole group work. One of the things that I just am so excited about with how we've done this is that this is where we're really providing a lot of hands-on activities for students so that they can really look at high-level abstract concepts and use their critical thinking skills tangibly. And so we've built in a number of different kinds of activities that they're doing on Zoom or in this remote setting, but that they're allowing them to engage directly with tools. So for example, virtual dissections in labs, some peer engineering activities in a breakout room where one student builds a physical product according to their partner's directions, and then they flip. And so they can watch each other and coach each other through that. Even individual math investigations using manipulatives found at home. So toothpick structures, probability activities using dice, and so on. And for balance, during this independent hands-on work time, students typically work off screen. So they're off in their homes with their materials, exploring at their own pace away from the video, but they can stay connected to Zoom audio for questions. And in fact, I've seen some kids who literally will just pop up to the screen like this, Miss L, and then everybody else will chime in. So they are working on their own, but you're still getting that community building experience even as they're doing this in their homes. And then we also encourage folks to use really everyday materials or building things that they have around their home for labs, which allows for even more choice and interest-driven exploration. And I think can be really comforting to teachers and administrators as they're setting up these kinds of experiences. You don't necessarily need a formal lab setup to do it. There can be a lot of interesting data points gained where perhaps students are all individually doing the same experiment, but they're using different kitchen items that they have in their home, for example. And then they're coming back together to talk about how that led that experiment to go differently, which of course is some critical thinking right there in and of itself. And then, related to that, really at CTD, whether we're in person or online, the most valuable part of any course is the human element. So students are able to engage with fellow deep thinkers and work together to discover those creative solutions to real-world problems in class. They're interacting with peers during partner and small group activities, perhaps in breakout rooms. They're getting individual feedback from instructors to push their learning further, and they're connecting with experts in the field to really gain perspective on different career paths, future explorations, or courses that they might take. And I want to point out too that as students at all levels take on these new academic challenges online and move through the talent development stages, the encouragement and reassurance of parents is also important, particularly as they're taking risks and making mistakes. So whether or not the parent is, actively sitting in on the class, still that encouragement and that support, that relationship is critical. It's another element of that human side of class that students need to have. And so again, what really sets us apart and makes me so excited about what we do are the interactions and relationships that we build in our classes. It's critical for gifted students in particular to receive support from adults who were like them as children, so to see that model or that example, and then for gifted children to share their excitement with each other like-minded peers. So the concept of finding your tribe, if you will, leads to sustained student engagement and success as students move through the talent development stages and begin to explore internships, lab experiences, and other things in their field. So that experience of working with like-minded peers and experts is tailored to each course, as you might expect. And there's two that I wanted to share today just to give a glimpse of what this might look like online for us. And so one is what we call Ctd Encounters. So these offer a deep dive into a high interest career-focused topic during a single live online session. So the instructors are experts in a career field and they lead demonstrations and hands-on explorations. One recent course I was in, students participated in an instructor-led cephalopod dissection, and then they used at-home everyday materials like plastic bottles to mimic its movements, which was just a lot of fun. And then another class was led by a microbiology expert. Students acted as doctors and engaged in small group problem solving to diagnose patient zero in a series of infectious disease case studies. And so once a student's interest is piqued from one of these experiences, then they can go on to take more in-depth courses and continue to grow with their learning there. Another one I wanted to point out is our Civic Leadership Institute. So our service learning and leadership program regularly brings in outside experts and speakers. So these could be top government, business, or nonprofit organizations, leaders, to share their experiences and perspectives with students and really help guide our students who are very passionate about creating change. And students can develop solutions to real world community challenges informed by their direct interactions with these experts. And that's something that we did when we hosted these in person, and is also really easy to do on Zoom to bring in and have those expert conversations with people.
Then another element of our online programming that has been kind of an emergent feature that we recognized as something like really unique and valuable and special that over the last few years we've put a lot of thought into really taking better advantage of is the diversity that having online opportunities can create. Because online learning eliminates the relevance of geography, and boundaries to who can learn together. As our programs have grown, one kind of outcome about that is that our student population has become a lot more diverse and a lot more distributed. And so when you have something big happening in the news, like a national election, having students be able to share perspectives from their local communities that kind of gives context, when you're just watching the results come in and you're just looking at places as being red or blue. There's been some really thoughtful conversations about the election and kind of current political issues in our online community. And we're always amazed at how thoughtful and generous and open-minded students are toward each other. But it adds such an additional layer to the experience that more and more we're trying to make student voices more visible and accessible to each other by mixing and matching students in different kinds of experiences and different kinds of ways, so that we have some very short cycle, very face-to-face very synchronous experiences, as well as some year-long courses where students really have opportunities to explore some topics in real depth and really get to establish deep relationships with other students and with instructors in those online spaces. So think about, not just how you can work with students in your own immediate school online, but what opportunities are there since everybody's working in Zoom, or everybody's working in Google Classroom, how you can connect your students with other students to get that kind of value add from diversity. Kind of one other concept that I want to touch on here too is that connecting students across communities is also a really valuable way to create the scale that you need to be able to provide some of these very advanced or very kind of niche experiences. In any one school, it might be very difficult to find 15 third graders that are ready to learn a particular programming language. But when you can open up a school or open up a program to connect students from all over the place, you can create a critical mass of students to be able to have rich conversation, but also to bring enough students together that the cost of providing something that is very specialized and advanced becomes competitive with the cost of only working with local students in a given classroom. So for example, one way that a lot of schools partner with us, is to provide their students with access to the whole menu of AP course offerings. A small rural school or a small private school or a school with, or a gifted school within a school, in an urban district, might not be able to aggregate enough students to be able to justify assigning a teacher to teach, a particular AP class, or you might not even have, expertise in your building to be able to provide, an experience in engineering or computer programming. But when we can connect teachers, when we can connect students together, then we can group students in many more different ways to create, just the right size and just the right kind of community for students to really have a rich and deep experience together.
Although not all of our courses do have eligibility criteria to join, all of our courses are designed with advanced learners in mind, and really leveraging the technology in the online setting to support differentiation. So our instructors start with high-level content and then use scaffolding to support students who may come with less experience or skill. The online format in particular allows for flexible pacing, allows for student choice in both when and how they might share their ideas, along with really endless opportunities for extensions, either individually or in groups. And students in all of our online courses can adjust the at-home activities to fit the resources available to them, as I mentioned with the kitchen materials example earlier. One particular benefit to online that I want to point out is the access that you have to real-time data or to self-graded assessments, especially using your learning management system or LMS. We use Schoology in our case, along with Google. Our instructors can set common learning objectives and then guide individual students along multiple paths towards mastery based on the results of those self-graded assessments, individual student skills, and background knowledge. So you can take that data and really use that to set a common goal and help students meet that in their own way. It allows for a choose your own adventure, if you will, set of options or menu board, choice boards for students, and motivates them to explore options that are of high interest to them and also that relate back to the course learning outcomes. Online students can also post their responses in a number of different ways. So they might post audio recording of them explaining something, a video and or written responses. They can meet one-on-one with their instructor for tailored support, and they can submit things at their own pace. In our parent-child courses that I mentioned earlier, parents might even record and post work on behalf of younger students who don't yet have the computer skills or the writing skills to do so. So again, leveraging that technology so that they can share their really advanced ideas without being tied into doing that in a particular way. And I think that hopefully should resonate with any educators we have on the call today, because certainly the idea of giving choice and helping students share their learning in ways that fit for them is something that is very natural to what you do in your in-person classroom and fits really well using this technology that we have online also.
Yeah, just maybe one thing that I would add to that too is, something that we've realized is that kind of following the natural or the default calendar of, how long a course should be, or, how long a class session should be. When you're working in a fully online space and that bell schedule doesn't matter as much because you're not trying to make sure everybody lands, in the cafeteria at the right time, has really opened up our thinking about the structure of courses. And so, as Amy mentioned, we have some online experiences that are as short as one morning, and others that are flexibly paced that students can engage with for a full year. So rather than trying to settle on, a one-size-fits-all model, we've given ourselves, kind of creative freedom to think about what is the structure that best fits the learning goal. And that slide's not going to load, so never mind. But actually, we're kind of coming close to the end of our time anyway, so why don't we go ahead and, you'll have access to the slides offline anyway, but let's kick over to the Q&A and the chat box and talk about some of your questions. So if you like, feel free to type questions or comments, or if you have a great resource to share with other people that are exploring online learning, feel free to share that as well. Okay, why don't we go first to the Q&A. Evan asks, will you be addressing the question of what type of student best fits your program? In other words, who is your program tailored to? Amy, do you want to talk about our programs for younger students, and then I'll talk about our programs for older students?
Sure. So for younger students, again, because it is about exposure and helping students see where they might have an interest or might have some talent, we offer first programs that are open enrollment, which means that any student is eligible to join. There's no specific criteria of test scores or testing or anything like that. And those start as young as age 3 for us and typically go up through about 2nd or 3rd grade. And so in that case, any family who thinks, oh, I wonder if my child is interested in this, or they've talked about X, Y, and Z, can join and try us out. And then we also have some enrollment, some eligibility, based programs for those same ages. And so in that case, those are for students who've already started to demonstrate some skill or some experience in an area, and they typically are qualifying by submitting some test scores to us, usually showing that they're in 90th national percentile and or via an admissions portfolio. And we put that criteria on those because those are really in-depth and really fast-paced and typically outside of grade level. And so we want to make sure that students who are taking those are ready for that experience. But again, we always have the mix of things that are open to any student who would like to try, along with those that are a little more specialized for students who have demonstrated that they are ready for more. And that typically, we go up through about 8th grade with that. But again, most of the open enrollment is at the younger elementary and early childhood ages.
Okay, and then for the older students, and as I mentioned, our concept of talent and giftedness is that talent is malleable and it emerges at different phases. And so our programs for our youngest students are purely interest-based. You don't need a specific test score in order to participate. But as the courses become more advanced and more specialized, then some of those programs become more selective. And some of those individual courses do have prerequisites. But if you visit our site, there's a section called Explore Courses. And you can see all of the different courses that are available for different students in different grade levels. And those will be linked to kind of program descriptions that will give you, the cost, the eligibility criteria, and kind of format information for all of those different program models. I would say for the older students, the kinds of students that are most likely to thrive are those students that are first curious and motivated, to learn something new. Students that are developing at least with time management skills, executive functioning skills, although, we try to develop those over the course of our programs too. So you'll notice that the programming that we offer for younger students those courses tend to be shorter. And then as students kind of move up the developmental continuum, those programs become both longer for the most part, emphasizing more independent and peer-to-peer learning. So we're gradually kind of transferring responsibility from being more teacher-centered, teacher-directed, teacher-facilitated to something that is more student-facilitated. We also are a destination for a lot of students that are looking for opportunities to accelerate academically. So for example, we have a lot of honors level credit-bearing courses, high school credit-bearing courses that we offer that many of the students who are enrolled are actually middle school students who are ready for access to that next level course. But for them, being able to access a high school level course would mean traveling across town to another school. Now that doesn't work very well logistically for a lot of places. So we have a lot of schools that work with us where a student, instead of going to a middle school language arts class or a middle school math class, will go to a computer lab or will go to a study hall and take an online course from us as a replacement instead. So we mix and match into students' experiences in a lot of different ways. And I will say that when my computer freaked out, I lost all of the chat comments before 12:50. So Amy, if you don't mind kind of scrolling back and seeing if there was anything there that we need to address.
Yeah, I was actually doing that just now.
Okay.
So funny you should say that. There's a couple of links folks were looking for, so I'm trying to get those in now for them. And then I think we've got a couple of questions possibly left in the Q&A as well. Looking through here to see if which ones we weren't able to cover already. Yeah, for folks interested in some of the graphics or the slides, we have copied that link into the chat, and I'll put that again as well for a copy of the slides. And that has all the graphics and the information on it, along with the items that Eric has up on this slide with more information. And then we've touched on this. Folks are curious if the Ctd programming is available to students throughout the US. And so I've touched on this a bit, but again, I just wanted to remind folks that you can join from anywhere in the world. And we truly do have students who've joined from across the world, which has just led to such an enriched experience for, I think, both the students and the teachers. Our website does list the eligibility criteria. So again, we've gone through some of that. And each program is unique in that sense. So if there's one you're particularly wondering about, check the links that we added to the chat, or Eric and I will have our contact information up at the end here. We're happy to direct you to the right place for more specific program questions.
Sure. And maybe just one other thing that I'll mention too is all of our credit-bearing courses we are advanced ed accredited as a supplemental school. All of our credit-bearing courses are NCAA approved, so your scholar athletes can take our classes with confidence, knowing that they'll be okay for college eligibility requirements. And all of our AP classes are College Board approved and facilitated by College Board Institute trained instructors. So if you're kind of thinking about being able to award credit, and is this something that can mix and match in with local courses in your school? The answer in most states is yes. We try to do everything that we can to, establish kind of external, credibility and credentials to give students and families and schools maximum flexibility in being able to incorporate experiences in our program in their overall educational program. Okay, any other questions, Amy, that you see that we should tackle before we let folks go?
I think we've gotten to all the ones that I'm seeing. Yes, I think we're set unless anybody else has any last minute things they want to ask on the spot here.
Okay, Samuel asks, what do you recommend for educators trying to bridge digital divides? where students' parents don't have access or experience with online learning or little online access? That's a great question. I guess a couple things on that. One is, and you know, before we address the specific challenges, is don't let concern about the digital divide prevent you from exploring providing opportunities in this space. You know, one thing to be aware of is that in the most recent data sets, you know, more than 95% of families say that they have internet access at home, and more students than you think have access to devices, even though for many low-income students, some of that access might be through a phone versus their own device. So when we think about accessibility, we think about a few things. One, mobile friendliness. And making sure things work on the widest variety of devices as possible. So, you know, we try to do things that are web-based and standards-based. We try to have a mix of kind of low bandwidth opportunities as well. So even when we do live sessions, as we've experienced today, sometimes there are hiccups in live sessions. And so we always record live sessions so that students that, you know, couldn't access the site on a given day are able to download a recording of that, you know, using multiple means of representation that kind of mixes text with some of those higher bandwidth things as video. But then also be aware of the fact that there's a lot of support now, both from the government, but also through a lot of the internet service providers and mobile providers that will actually provide free or very low cost internet access to low income families with school-age children. But now, you know, worldwide, there are more people who have access to a smartphone than have access to drinkable water at home. So it's really expanding the universe of possibilities. Okay. I think we are at time. So if we didn't get a chance to address your question, if you want to stay on, we can stick around for a couple minutes before we lose the chat. And then also, you can feel free to email me or Amy. Our email addresses are here on screen. We'd be happy to share more information about our programs, or, you know, think out loud with you about how you're approaching online learning in your school. So thank you for your time.